Well, hello, and let's take a look at what's happening this week. This week we have the Moon, Mars, Saturn, Grand Water Trine, or first Wednesday with Mercury Retrograde, and we also have Venus Cazimi happening this week. All right, let's take a look at what's happening on Monday. This is March 17th. As always, Monday is the Moon's day. The Moon is waning in Libra, out of element, Peregrine in Jupiter's decan in Mars's terms, critical, entering Scorpio and approaching a Pluto sextile and Lilith conjunction. Yeah, this one is an interesting day for the Moon, because I don't know if you remember recently, I kind of give you a little bit of what happens behind the scenes when I'm getting these charts together. Because really the Moon being up at the last degree of a sign doesn't really matter too much, especially as the Sun will be rising at different times in different places. And so the Moon might be at the last degree in one place, but the Moon might not be in the last degree in another place. But like I said, the charts that I cast are always from like smack dab in the center of the Earth. So this is the Moon at the last degree as the Sun is rising at the center of the Earth. So bear with me as to why this is important. Because I think that the big thing that I was trying to capture with this image was just this idea of the transition from Libra towards Scorpio. And as you can see in the image, the Moon is really moving from a place of darkness towards a place of light, even though she is in Scorpio. Because there will be the trine to Mars, there'll be all these sorts of things in Scorpio that are actually really positive. But she's also walking towards a sword. So it's this more passive object of one's gaze to an object of power. And so I think that one of the things that we're sitting with today is this transition of being able to be a little bit more passive to needing to be a lot more active in the pursuit of one's wants, dreams, and all sorts of things along those lines. And I think that the Pluto sextile that will also be forming there should provide a lot of interesting material to work with as we go under this exploration, so to speak. But it's for that reason that I gave today 2.5 difficulty and a 3.5 utility. It's interesting, I know that I would give it so much utility, but I think that the biggest thing is that despite it being the Moon moving towards Scorpio, despite it being a lot of these difficulties, the Moon also is getting a lot of resources to work with. The thing that we might be doing might be difficult, but at the very least, we have lots of hands in that thing, or lots of feelings in that thing. We're just not on our own. And I think that's enough utility to go by. Some might even say that the Moon being in Scorpio now can be received by Pluto, who's like the modern ruler of Scorpio, which I don't necessarily use, but I think it's another piece to add to this. I think that we're doing scary things. We're looking into some very scary facets of our world. So we have Mars, we have Pluto, we have Saturn, all these really scary planets on our side. So we're able to tend to those things, not with ease, but with expertise. But some of the signs that should be paying extra attention to today are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Scorpio, of course. All right, moving on to our Tuesday, it is Mars's day. Mars is in Cancer, slow, fallen, in his element, Mercury's decan and Jupiter's terms, moving towards a Moon mutual reception and towards receiving Saturn through a trine. So this is what I've been talking about, and kind of really the big reason why I gave the Monday a little bit more utility than otherwise, because really the Moon will spend most of her day in Scorpio, so we're really getting to tap into this Grand Water Trine in a really nice way. I think last week we talked about how Mars and Saturn weren't quite seeing each other just yet. They're really close, but not quite. But now I feel like they're pretty much within each other's orbit, especially with the Moon coming by and serving as an intermediary between these two things. And in the image, I just have all these three figures having a nice dinner and talking their feelings out. Everything is a little blurry and dark, but there's a sense of being cozy and being protected and being in a space where you're allowed to talk about these very difficult things under a nice meal, nonetheless. I feel like that's the Moon-Mars mutual reception. So I think today can be a day of getting together with a group of people or with your friends or with your loved ones and really addressing some of the things that really terrify you about how the world is changing, especially considering that Pluto sextile and all those things. It can also be a good time to be really serious and honest about things that have been troubling you and potentially coming together to find creative solutions for those problems as well. So that's some good forward development, I would say. And it's for those reasons that I gave today a 2.5 difficulty and a 3 utility. The reason why the utility is a little lower today than it was yesterday is because despite being in a Grand Water Trine with these planets, the moon is said to still be enclosed by the malefics when she is forming this Grand Water Trine. So it's like, it's just like the moon is only really able to see the difficult things about life at the moment, which can be very debilitating. And I think that's the difficulty of today. But the utility is also being able to be well acquainted with those things. Like in talking these things out with Mars and Saturn and Pluto and all these scary figures in your life, because these topics are so commonplace to them, they'll bring a certain degree of comfort to being able to tackle these things. So I think that it's not all bad news when we have Saturn, Mars, and Pluto all together in an aspect like that. So yeah. And some of the signs that should be paying attention to today are Aries, Cancer, Scorpio, Capricorn, and Aquarius. All right, moving on to our Wednesday. This is our first Mercury day with Mercury Retrograde. It's Mars 19th. Mercury is still in Aries, is out of sect and element, Peregrine, Mars' decan, in Venus's terms, separating from a Venus conjunction. And if you remember last week, Mercury was getting all sorts of radical on their skateboard. Somebody who was Venus or Jupiter, whoever, took a picture or a video of that and spread it on the internet. But now Mercury is retrograde. And so we're getting to revise some of what just happened. I think that Mercury today is seeing just how far and wide his deeds have reached. So Mercury is in a little bit of a shock. What was supposed to be just a cool little stunt for their friends is now a whole thing. Mercury doesn't necessarily seem to be meeting the consequences of those actions just yet, but we're certainly shocked by that. And so I think that today might be a day where we get to see a little bit of the repercussions of our actions last Wednesday. Yeah, and that can be both a good or a bad thing, depending on what it is that you did. But it's for those reasons that I gave today a 3.5 difficulty and a 1.5 utility. I think the difficulty is in the fact that the deed is done. Now, the only thing to do is to revisit what has just happened. The utility is in doing so and actually being able to revisit and tend to those things, as opposed to just moving forward and having this thing explode without you having any say in how that can go. As Mercury will go back into Pisces, explaining what and why you did what you did might be difficult, but you've been warned. And the signs that should be paying attention to today are Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Virgo, Libra, and Sagittarius. Moving on to our Thursday, it is Jupiter's day. Jupiter is in Gemini, in detriment, in his element, in Mars' decan, in Venus's terms, soon opposing and receiving the moon. And this one is a bit of a callback to a couple transits ago. So you might have remembered that Jupiter was a little lazy, not doing much, had received a box a couple weeks back, but then Jupiter got distracted by whatever Venus and Mercury were doing. And now Jupiter is getting back to work because Jupiter is speeding up. It's tracking along in Gemini, feeling pretty good. And so now Jupiter has time to open that package again and see what the fuck was that. I think whatever was delivered has the potential to be some pretty interesting stuff. It can be pretty good, especially since the moon is in Sagittarius and will be received by Jupiter in her own decan. So this means that the moon is both received, but she's also has resources of her own in that space. So there's also something that she can give back to Jupiter, even if it's just a little bit of like, hey, I can take care of things in Sagittarius out here for you a little bit. And so this can be a little bit of what you get today. It might be something like a message or something that was delivered to you a couple of weeks back now circles back around, and now you're actually able to reap the benefits of that thing. Maybe at that time you're just too distracted or too busy, or you just couldn't really be bothered to do the thing. But now that the moon is back to that same place and everything is moving forward again and things are a little bit speedier, retrogrades aside, we're talking about Jupiter here, we're able to actually make some motions with Jupiter. So this is pretty exciting because I feel like this is the moment in Jupiter's Gemini story that we're actually beginning to close that chapter. In many ways, we've been opening boxes with Jupiter and Gemini for what seems to be forever now. But then now, it seems like finally the last box has been opened and we're able to just get to business. And it's for those reasons that I gave today a 2 difficulty and a 1.5 utility. I think the difficulty of today is just in circling back to that thing. You're gonna notice that both the scores are pretty low. It's not that big of an eventful day, but the difficulty is in just having to circle back and kind of like muster the energy to get back to what you were doing. The utility, however, is in just kind of like closing that loose end and being able to, again, like I said, just move forward. These are the last steps of Jupiter in Gemini, and soon will be Jupiter in Cancer, exalted and feeling pretty good. So we have that to look forward to, and no more retrogrades with Jupiter in detriment. So I think that despite the low scores, today it's still a step in the right direction. And some of the signs that should focus on today are Gemini, Cancer, Sagittarius, and Pisces. All right, moving on to Friday. This is our Venus day with Venus in Aries, out of element, in detriment, and Mars' decan and Jupiter's terms, sextile Pluto, approaching Cazimi, and retrograde. So the sun has just really entered Aries and is met with Venus right out of the gate. Last week, we had Venus just walking back to the shores that are kind of like the threshold between Aries and Pisces, and she was very determined with a piece of paper in hand, like the new rules and regulations that Venus wants to bring to the sun. This is how things need to be done now, as per Venus. And then now, Venus actually comes into contact with the sun and delivers those. I think it's really interesting to think about this Venus Cazimi because it's not just a Venus Cazimi, but it's also Venus being received by the sun in Aries. And so this idea of or message being received in one way or another is very much there, because we've been talking about so much with the Venus retrograde about this idea of coming to terms with your most personal needs, those things that you yourself needs that might infringe on somebody else's needs, or things that you might need that maybe your partners disagree with. We've been talking a lot about that. And I think that maybe today can be a little bit of that, I don't know. This might be a harsh word, but it could be that, but it can be just a little bit of an ultimatum moment for Venus. It's just like Venus comes to the sun, she says, this is how I want things to be done. If you don't do it this way, then I'm gonna leave. I think this Cazimi can be a little harsh just because of the combativeness of Aries, but I think at the same time, it's something that is very much needed for Venus to be able to live life as she likes it, not as someone else likes it, if that makes any sense. I hope it resonates with you if this is a big transit for you. And it's for that reason that I give today a 4 difficulty and a 1 utility. I think it's pretty difficult, guys. Despite the narrative being empowering and exciting, considering how we started the whole retrograde cycle, this is still a very difficult thing to do. It might be that a lot of what you need to request actually is something that the other party will not accept, and that must just be fine if we are to continue living life. Sometimes it's not always that you will get what you want from the people that you want it from. Sometimes you need to go get it somewhere else, and that might just be the case with Venus going back into Pisces now. So just keep that in mind as we navigate through this weekend. But the 1 utility for today, I think, really is in, I guess, facing that difficulty. I don't think that there's any other thing that I can grasp onto today. It really is just that. But some of the signs that this is especially relevant for are Aries, Taurus, Leo, Libra, and Aquarius. All right, moving on to our Saturday and beginning our weekend. It is March 22nd, Saturn's day. Saturn is still in Pisces, out of element, peregrine in Mars's decan and Hermes, approaching a Mars trine and soon mutually receiving the moon through a sextile. And today's image is a bit of a callback to an image that we saw way back when Saturn was still, I think, retrograde, lost in the sauce in Pisces, and the moon was in Capricorn. Because one of the things that I talked about is the moon's ability to receive Saturn in Pisces, because the moon is one of the planets that rules water signs. So that means that whenever the moon goes by Capricorn, Saturn kind of gets a glimpse of how things look like back at home, or kind of gets a little bit of a juice from Capricorn that nurtures and helps Saturn continue to do her thing in this Pisces landscape. Today we have a little bit of that, and we also have that Mars trine building up, which is really exciting. And so this is why I have Lady Saturn just revisiting that memory, especially as she goes into Aries, which is a much more familiar sign for Saturn than Pisces is. So I was very much seeing this moon sextile that's sort of like a little bit of a reminder of why Saturn needs to keep going forward, or why Saturn is going through this spooky Pisces tunnel where she will meet up with Mars eventually. And that's also what we see in the image. It's just Mars slowly walking up the tunnel, which eventually will be the tunnel that both these planets take to leave to their next respective signs. And so I think today can be a day of being reminded of why we're doing the hard things that we're doing at a moment, but not just a reminder, also a motivation piece to keep you going, because we're really close to the end of this whole Saturn and Pisces thing, and a small push can really go a long way. But yes, it's for that reason that I gave today 2 difficulty and a 3.5 utility. I think the difficulty isn't being in Pisces, being lost, nothing's new there. But the utility is both being helped by Mars, who's coming along really soon, and the moon, who's providing a little bit more of a more nurturing help for Saturn. I think we talked about last week how the Mars trine is supportive for Saturn, but it also comes with the sense of difficulty. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to get that support. I think the moon supports that comes to make things a little bit easier for Saturn. So that's really nice. And some of the signs that I really should pay attention to today are Aries, Cancer, Scorpio, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. All right, wrapping up our week, it is the Sun's day, March 23rd, with the Sun in Aries, exalted in Mars's decan and Jupiter's terms, separating from a Venus Cazimi while moving towards a Mercury Cazimi. Nice. I like today a lot, especially for the Sun, because like we talked about last week, things were really scary for the Sun. We had that lunar eclipse, we had that sea monster, and everything was like a little unpredictable, and we didn't know if we're gonna make it or not. And eventually we do make it to Aries. Here's what we have: the Sun just landing in Aries, bringing all of his goodies to Venus. So yeah, that answers the question. We really did make it, and the image looks bright and happy and exciting, mostly kind of signaling that to the Sun, like, hey, like, this is a good place for you to be. You're exalted, it's spring, things are starting to get warmer in the northern hemisphere, so there's really this big sense of optimism. Although the Sun, if you remember, had a pretty difficult journey, so it's not like the usual celebratory Aries season that we usually get. There is still work that needs to be done. And so I think one of the things that we can expect for today is that while there is room for celebration, while there's room for excitement, and we're really happy to be in a better place and things are warmer and happier and all of that, there's very little that can be kept. A lot of that is going to go to Venus, and a lot of that is going to go to Mercury, who are both in troubled situations and who are both retrograde. So I think that while there's room for celebration, there's also a little bit of a thing looming in the background, kind of like dampening the mood a little bit. But still, I think it's an exciting time to be alive for the Sun. We will have an eclipse very soon here too, but for now, things look fine, I think. But yes, it's for that reason that I gave today a 1.5 difficulty and a 4 utility. I think the difficulty is so low just because the sun is so acquainted with Aries that any difficult thing that comes up, we were able to tend to very quickly. And also it's spring, things look beautiful and exciting, it's hard to be upset by that. Now the utility though is really kind of providing a lot of juice and assistance and problem solving to whatever area of your life Aries is. Because like I said, we've been having Venus retrograde in there, we've been having Mercury retrograde in there, and we'll have an eclipse soon. And so the sun being there can provide a little bit of help, even though the sun is also the thing that's getting eclipsed, but we don't need to talk about that for now. That does not change the fact that the sun can still provide a lot of help. And so I think that today might be a good day to kind of get prepared for that upcoming eclipse and to redistribute some of the good fortune that you might have received since the sun entered Aries a couple days ago. But with that, the signs that should be paying attention to today are Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Leo, Virgo, and Libra. But all right, guys, this is our week. Let's take a look at our week at a glance. It looks that we settled out at 2.5 evenly this week, which is really nice. It's pretty similar to what we had last week, but the biggest difference is that there's no eclipse, so things get to really be even at. Luckiest days of the week, so to speak, are our Monday, Saturday, and our Sunday. And I think the most difficult days are just Wednesday and Friday because of the Mercury and the Venus retrograde, respectively. So I would reserve things for Monday and for the weekend, and maybe try to avoid really big things on Wednesday and Friday, maybe even Thursday too, for that matter. But if you're curious about what that means for you specifically, and you know your rising sign, I have an add-on to the series on my newsletter where I give you some of the most important days of the week for your sign and what to do with all of that information as well. If you want to know about that, you just go to themercuryrising.com and you can subscribe to my newsletter. And as always, I am Joji. I'm an astrologer, and I'll see you next week. All right, see ya.